Even before Chichikov had time to have a good look at the place, the governor grabbed him by the arm and introduced him to his wife. Here, too, the newcomer did the proper thing. He paid her some compliment, such as is appropriate from a middle-aged man of a rank, which is neither too high nor too low. When the dancers formed couples and the rest were crowded against the wall, he folded his hands behind him and watched intently for a couple of minutes. Many of the ladies were fashionably dressed, while others had put on whatever God had happened to send to that provincial town. The men here, as everywhere, were of two sorts. Some were thin, and these undulated around the ladies. They could hardly have been told from those of Petersburg, with their whiskers combed just as neatly, tastefully, and deliberately, or simply with pleasant-looking, clean-shaven, oval faces. They seated themselves near the ladies and spoke French to them just as nonchalantly as in the capital. The other sort of men consisted of the fat ones, or those, like Chichikov, who were neither too fat nor too thin. And these, when they did glance at the ladies, only backed away from them, looking around to see whether a green table hadn't been set up for cards. They had round, full faces. Some of them even had warts, and a few were pockmarked to boot. They did not wear their hair in a long forelock, nor in curls, nor in the devil-may-care style, as the French call it. They wore it short-cropped or slicked down, and their features were mostly full and stolid. These were the town's respected officials. Alas, the fat of this world manage their affairs better than the thin. Thin men are likely to go in for special assignments, or they are merely carried on the rolls and just make token appearances in the office. Their existence is somehow too easy and ethereal and quite insecure. Fat men never accept the, so to speak, circumstantial positions, only the direct ones. And if they install themselves somewhere, they do so securely and solidly, and the seat will sag and crack beneath them before they'll budge. They don't go for outward glamour. Their frock coats are not so well cut as those of the thin ones, but then there's God's own bounty in their strong boxes. Within 3 years, a thin man won't have a single serf soul left unmortgaged. While look at the fat one. He goes his way quietly, and lo and behold, he has bought a house in his wife's name at one end of the town. And then at the other end, another house, and then a little outside the town, a small hamlet, and later a whole village and all that goes with it. Finally, the fat man, after serving God and Tsar and earning general respect, retires from service, moves out of town, and settles down as a landowner, a hospitable Russian country gentleman. And thus he lives, and lives well. And after him come his thin heirs, who promptly squander, Russian style, the wealth he has accumulated. It was along these lines that Chichikov was musing as he examined the company, and the result of his musing was that he joined the fat ones, among whom he found all those faces already familiar to him. The public prosecutor, with his very black, very thick eyebrows and a slightly winking left eye that seemed to be saying, "Join me in the other room, I have something to tell you," although he was really the serious, silent type. The very short postmaster, who was nevertheless a wit and philosopher. The president of the district court, a quite reasonable and jovial individual. All of them greeted Chichikov as they would an old friend, and he responded with rather airy, sideward bows, which were nevertheless quite friendly. Here he made the acquaintance of two landowners, the affable and obliging Manilov and the rather clumsy-looking Sobakevich, who started off by stepping on his foot and saying, "Beg pardon." At this point, cards for whist were thrust into Chichikov's hands, and he accepted them with his usual polite bow. They sat down at the green table and did not leave it until supper was served. All conversation was immediately suspended as they got down to business. Although the postmaster was an extremely chatty person, as soon as he held cards in his hands, his face became the very picture of thought. He pulled his lower lip over the upper one and maintained this expression throughout the whole game. When he played a card, he banged the table, saying, "Off with you, you old hag," if it happened to be a queen, or "Go and show him my music," if it was a king. While the president of the district court would answer with a phrase like, "And I'll pull his whispers for him." From time to time, as the players threw cards down on the table, phrases such as, "Let's just see what happens," or "Might as well play diamonds since there's nothing else," would escape them. Or they would simply mutter, "Hey, hearts, hearties," or "spades, spadies," or even simply "spuds," and other such nicknames for the suits. At the end of the game, there was the usual rather loud argument. The newcomer took part in it, so that everyone could see he was arguing too, but that he was being pleasant about it. He never said, for instance, "You played the deuce." Instead, he would say, "You were pleased to play the deuce, and I had the honor of covering it." To make his opponents accept his point more readily, he kept proffering his silver and enamel snuff box, at the bottom of which 2 violets could be seen, placed there for their fragrance. The attention of the newcomer was focused on Manilov and Sobakevich. He had called aside the president of the district court and the postmaster to inquire about them, and the few questions he had asked were enough to show that he was not merely a curious, but also a methodical man. He wanted to know how many serfs each of them owned and in what condition their estates were, and only after this did he ask their first name. In no time at all, he had managed to charm both these landowners. Manilov, a man not yet middle-aged with eyes as sweet as sugar, which he screwed up whenever he laughed, was delighted beyond all bounds with Chichikov. He pressed his hand for a very long time and begged the newcomer to do him the honor of visiting him on his estate, which, he said, was only some 12 miles outside the town limits. To this, Chichikov answered with a polite bow and a sincere pressure of the hand that he would not only come with the greatest of pleasure, but would consider it his sacred duty to make this visit. Sobakevich also invited him, although quite laconically, saying, "Come and see me too," and clicked the heels of his high boots, for which it might have seemed impossible to find feet large enough, especially now that the race of hero giants is becoming extinct, even in Russia. The next day, Chichikov had lunch at the police chief's. They sat down to a whist table at 3 p.m. and played until 2 in the morning. It was there, by the way, that he made the acquaintance of another landowner, one Nozdrov, an outgoing fellow of about 30, who, after they had exchanged about 3 or 4 words, started calling him by his first name. Nozdrov was also on a familiar first-name basis with the prosecutor and the police chief, and yet, when the stakes on the table mounted, these two kept an eye on almost every card he played, and closely scrutinized the tricks he took. The next evening, Chichikov spent in the house of the president of the district court, who received in his rather grubby dressing gown, although among his guests there were a couple of ladies of sorts. Then Chichikov attended an evening reception at the vice-governor's, a big dinner at the tax farmers, another dinner at the public prosecutor's, which was not as big, but which must have cost at least as much, and a snack at the mayor's after the church service, which must also have cost as much. In a word, he spent no time at the inn, only returning there to sleep. Everywhere the newcomer displayed presence of mind and proved himself a seasoned man of the world. Whatever the conversation, he always knew how to keep it going. If it was about stud farms, he spoke about stud farms. If it was about dogs, he would impart sound observations on this subject too. If the talk turned on some investigation made by the National Treasury, he showed that he was quite familiar with legal quibbles. If the discussion was about the game of billiards, he did not miss out there either. If they brought up philanthropy, he dwelt on it with tears glinting in his eyes. And about customs officials, he spoke with as much authority as if he himself had been both a customs clerk and a customs inspector. But the remarkable thing about it was that he could discuss all these matters with calm dignity, and that he always behaved in the proper way, never speaking either too loudly or too softly. In short, a man of substance, whichever way you looked at it. All the officials were delighted at the arrival of this new personality. But the remarkable thing about it... Sorry, I already read that. The governor estimated him as a man of goodwill. The public prosecutor said that he was a business-like fellow. The colonel of the gendarmes described him as very learned. The president of the district court thought him well-informed and honorable. The chief of police honorable and amiable. The wife of the chief of police most amiable and most gallant. Even Sobakevich, who seldom had a kind word for anyone, once arrived home from town very late, undressed, stretched out on his bed next to his gaunt wife, and declared, "You know, my love, I went to a reception at the governor's and to dinner with the chief of police and made the acquaintance of a collegiate counselor called Pavel Ivanovich Chichikov, an extremely pleasant fellow." To this his wife answered, and kicked him. Such was the general impression made by the newcomer. It was quite flattering and lasted until a strange peculiarity of his, and a certain business in which he was involved came to light. But we are soon to learn about this matter which all but threw the entire town into confusion.